Hi chickens, I'm doing a video today about self-counselling, about how to counsel yourself and what the limitations probably are when it comes to counselling yourself and why it's so useful to be able to put some techniques in place to give yourself some counselling. And obviously with counselling comes the very necessary need for objectivity, which is why a lot of people who find themselves too close to a situation or find themselves embroiled in a crisis situation will need to go to a helping professional or a listening professional, a counsellor of some kind, because objectivity is obviously the key to working out what the patterns are, working out what the limiting thoughts are, and putting strategies and action plans into place to tackle those issues. A lot of people who find themselves too close to the situation or find that they're trying to kind of work out what the root causes are of a long-standing issue or reoccurring issue that's been going on for years, obviously will need some outside help. And I think that's why it's a shame that even in this day and age there are groups of people in this society who will say that counselling is for people that can't hack it, and counselling isn't a way to get on with your life. It's a kind of pathway for people who are weak. These are things that I've heard said, and I think it's kind of an insane point of view. Because everybody has shit to sort out, and if you don't know that there are techniques in place to help yourself, or you're only just coming to the realization that you may seriously need to address an issue, of course you're going to want to go to a professional who has the necessary working knowledge of the different techniques you can put in place to reach the core issue, work with the core issue, bring it out to the light and deal with it. So I think it probably comes from a place of fear largely when people talk about how counselling is for the weak, or how a counsellor will never really be able to help you with anything. And remember, the bottom line with any kind of counselling relationship that you have with somebody, even if they're not a professional, it could just be a friend who's come to you in a listening capacity to try and help you work something out. The bottom line with any kind of relationship like that is that it's not about that person giving you the answer. In fact, it's normally about that person just listening to you, giving you a chance to speak honestly about the issues that you feel are coming up, and in the long run, just ask more fitting questions most of the time. I tell tarot querents quite frequently that tarot doesn't actually have the answer, it just has the best possible questions to help you reach the answer. No counselling relationship should be built on the concept of the counsellor giving the patient or client or person in distress, the speaker if you like, the answer. That's not really how counselling is supposed to work. So I think there's also probably a misconception from people who hate on the field of counselling that a counsellor is supposed to give the answer. And of course, if that's the idea that someone's going with, then it's no wonder that they have some negative views about the field of counselling, because that's not really what counselling is for. So having said that, I am currently studying for my diploma in spiritual counselling, and I will go into that at a later stage in this video, just talking about why I'm doing that and why I feel it's going to be beneficial to me to do that. And it's kind of got me thinking a lot about techniques that you can put in place to counsel yourself and what the benefits would be for giving yourself some self-counselling. And this is something that a lot of websites will talk about, and a lot of counsellors themselves will give their clients or patients techniques to go forth with, because counselling is not just supposed to occur when you're in the room with the counsellor. You're supposed to be given homework that you can kind of do on your own time and inject into your life. There are supposed to be tools to put into your toolkit that you're going to kind of get at the end of this structured counselling period, so that you feel you can go forth and counsel yourself anyway. So yeah, a lot of counsellors do talk openly about the value of self-counselling. I think that counselling yourself gives you a greater sense of self-awareness. Often when you're in a counselling, like a patient counsellor capacity with somebody who's helping you through a certain issue, those counselling sessions can be very useful, but sometimes you'll come out of them and you feel that you've obviously been led to speak about certain things by the counsellor, and that counsellor has aided you with certain guiding questions, and the conversation quite often goes in the way that the counsellor wants it to go in. That's not to say that the counsellor shouldn't be asking these questions in order for the person that's getting the help to come up with their own responses. Of course, it should be more about the person getting the help being able to speak than about the counsellor being able to speak. But in general, the counsellor will always be able to lead the discussion in the direction that they want to go. And often we can forget about our own sense of self-awareness when we're getting counselling from somebody. We can forget to stop and look at the tools that we're putting in place and decide how we feel about them. So self-counselling is good for that. It's good for self-awareness and self-confidence and that kind of thing. To be able to see yourself helping yourself is kind of very empowering. And if you look at some of the techniques that you will come across in the average counselling session, no matter what kind of field of counselling you're coming at it from, a lot of those techniques can be rehashed into things that can be very effectively used in a self-counselling capacity. I also think, as I said, a lot of counsellors do teach self-counselling techniques and do give homework which is supposed to veer on the side of the person being helped having that toolkit in place to help themselves as well. I think self-counselling is an excellent backup for therapy, and it's something that can be used alongside the therapeutic relationship. So if you are in therapy or you are in counselling, you'll probably find that self-counselling will become that backup that you need between sessions, or become that backup that you need when you feel that going to friends is not going to give enough of an objective, unbiased platform from which to speak. Obviously, because friends and parents and partners are very involved with you and feel that they know you on that deeper level. So the useful thing about having a counsellor is that objectivity. And sometimes you may feel between sessions that you might want to discuss something with a friend or a partner, but you worry that that objectivity will not be there, that they're either going to kind of like overtly offend your position instead of giving you the chance to work out how you feel about your position, or on the other side of the spectrum, they might argue with you or try and get you to, see a truth that they've already decided on. The counsellor, any counsellor worth their salt anyway, will not do that. They will always be giving you techniques and tools through which to actually reach your own conclusion and give your own response. And if you feel that a friend or a partner is not going to be able to do that to you, for you, then you might want to go into some self-counselling techniques between sessions. Self-counselling is also something that's been utilised a lot by people who can't afford counselling. Counselling comes in all different kinds of shapes and sizes, and a counsellor does not necessarily need to be like a qualified psychologist or anything like that. There are many different diplomas you can do and many different pathways towards becoming a qualified counsellor, and counsellors range from all ends of the spectrum. You can get relationship counsellors, addiction counsellors, counsellors that specialise in child counselling. You can get counsellors that you will find will help with things like OCD and anxiety, how to break bad habits, that kind of thing. There are counsellors for all kinds of things. There's even counsellors for stuff like sleeplessness, and different counsellors employ different methods. There are some that are very middle of the road, some that veer towards the psychotherapeutic techniques, and then others will use things like Reiki, hypnotherapy, tarot. You'll get some transpersonal techniques in there. Dream work will be encouraged. So when you're shopping for a counsellor, it really is a bit of a minefield. It can be a bit of a minefield, but it can also be a bit difficult on the pocket at times. And I think that's why self-counselling is employed as well. And a lot of counsellors out there are trying to make it affordable for people on the lower end of the economic scale to get counselling, because it's important for anybody who feels that they need that objective help from a professional to be able to get it. And there are a lot of free resources in the UK, at least, where free counselling is there and available. But when you are looking for a counsellor that specialises in something specific or uses a certain practice or technique that you feel favours the way you feel about things, then it can be pricey on the pocket. So there are certain self-counselling techniques. Sorry, I'm not being very articulate today. There are certain self-counselling techniques that can be good in terms of price. And another thing that's important about self-counselling is that it allows you to control the pace and intensity of your journey. Looking into a certain issue or trying to get over a certain problem. Sometimes when you are in a counselling situation with somebody, when you are employing a listening helper or somebody with certain specific qualifications to help you through something, you'll find that the pace and intensity sometimes sits comfortably with you and sometimes is a little bit too much. And sometimes it's difficult to know where that line is because, of course, you have employed a counsellor or sought out a counsellor to challenge you in an objective manner and get you to think in a new way and, kind of push you towards putting those action strategies in place. So sometimes if you feel that the pace is too intense or that things are going too fast or there are areas that you don't want to go into, you may not feel that you can be particularly assertive because you may think, well, this is challenging work, what the hell did I expect? Of course, it should be challenging work. So sometimes you don't know where that line is. So that's another reason why you might decide to embark on some kind of self-counselling, so that you can explore your journey on your own terms and stop when you feel it's too much. But of course, on the other hand, you need to have the foresight to know that even in self-counselling, challenging things will come up. For example, if you've ever done any shadow work, you will know that's true. When you're dragging all of this crap to the surface, it is very difficult, it is challenging, and even though you're just doing it by yourself, it's you that has to give yourself that push, and that can be very scary and very difficult. I also think that self-counselling is very important when it comes alongside a therapeutic relationship with a skilled counsellor, because it's very easy to become dependent on a skilled counsellor or on a skilled helper of any kind. And sometimes that dependence on the person who's helping you, the actual personality that's injected into your life in that objective helping way, becomes almost a symbol of power. And rather than engaging in the techniques that they're giving to you and learning from what they're giving to you in terms of strategy, you actually begin to think that what you need is themselves. What you need is the person who's counselling you. And this can come into kind of quite uncomfortable guru territory or codependence territory, and that can be quite dangerous for the counselling itself in terms of how it works. I've known in the past a few people, when I was going through a lot of my own issues actually, and I was kind of more exposed to these people who were going through similar issues, I've known a few different people who used to get very, very desperate between sessions with their counsellor or helper. They used to have a number that the counsellor would tell them that they could call if they were in dire need, and they would call that number probably even more than was appropriate. Through the week they would miss the counsellor, and often if the counsellor was, going away on a holiday or something that was already pre-booked and had been explained to the patient would feel either resentful or panicky or highly anxious about the idea that the counsellor was going to be further away, or that they were going to have to miss a session because of something in the counsellor's life that had to be done. And this codependency can be shrunk and dealt with and tamed by self-counselling techniques. Because when you're in the counselling situation, when you are going through the therapeutic relationship, you are of course always picking up and learning tools and strategies to deal with your own issues. The ambition of the counsellor should never be to keep you in the chair forever. The ambition of any good counsellor is to get you well enough and healthy enough and motivated enough and self-aware enough to eventually be your own counsellor, to deal with these things for yourself. Counselling should only ever be an interim situation. Of course, you can have elongated, extensive periods of counselling, and there's nothing wrong with that, but every counsellor's ambition should be to help you to have enough strategies in place to go forth on your own. The success story in any counselling situation is the point where both counsellor and patient feel that they're both ready to move on. That there has been enough foundation work put in place for something healthy to be built without the counsellor's intervention or overseeing. So I think that's really important, and I think there is a danger with some counsellors, certainly, that I've heard of and been aware of, where the ambition is actually not to get the patient out of the chair, but in fact to keep them there forever. But that's something I'll go into a bit later. But yeah, I do think that codependency, or the idea of seeing the counsellor as being more important than the tools that the counsellor is trying to give you, can be a danger for people, and it's not something that I would judge anybody over at all. I think it's just one of those things where when you're desperate and you're hurt and you're alone, or you're confused about your life or your place in your life, of course that image of an objective, empowering individual who is trying to kind of untangle the labyrinth that is inside your head and give you a map to be able to travel around it can be very enticing and can kind of make somebody feel very safe. So instead of actually looking at the tools they're giving you and structuring them in your own life, you may feel tempted to actually see the counsellor themselves as your salvation, and that's something that's quite dangerous but does go on. With regard to requirements for self-counselling takes some commitment, obviously. It's not something where you can just fall down at the first hurdle. I think a lot of people who read tarot actually got into learning the tool of tarot in order to employ methods of self-counselling, and they will tell you themselves that it's a long, hard slog. It does take some commitment and it does take some discipline, and if you come across something that you find challenging or that you don't like, the temptation may be to just stop right there. Or if you don't see tangible results in your life in the first week or two, it can become very frustrating, and it can start to feel lonely as well. It's just you recording your progress and going through the motions, and if you feel like that anxiety still hasn't lifted, or that issue with your partner or whatever is still there, then it can be very tempting to just put the deck away and forget about the journal you're keeping and think, I can't do this. But in fact, you can do it. It just takes kind of a steady build up of skills and a steady build up of resilience. Resilience is another thing that's really important when you are counselling yourself, and sincerity as well. You've got to know that you're doing it for the right reasons. You know, you've got to know that you're coming at it from the right angle. So there's that discipline there, and that idea that, you know, you need to know in your heart that your self-counselling is coming from a pure place. It's not coming from you because you want to punish yourself. It's not coming from you because somebody else is doing it and you feel you should be doing it. You know, none of those things should matter. It should be, you should be coming at it from that foundation level of something is wrong and I want to do what I can to fix it and to find my self-empowerment within it. You know, and self-worth is important as well. I think there are certain limitations when it comes to self-counselling. Like I said, with root causes, with deep-seated issues, with things that have been going on for a very long time that have never before been addressed and have only just come out of the woodwork, like for example a painful memory that you've been experiencing, or a habit that you've been dealing with for years and years and years and have never really put any energy into changing or unlocking, that's when the assistance of somebody qualified is obviously going to be beneficial to you, because you are starting completely from scratch. And it's the same with the value of self-worth in the counselling setting. Self-counselling comes from a place of interest in self-development, and if you're interested in your self-development and if you're interested in making life better for yourself, then that's normally going to come from a place where there's a little bit of self-worth growing. If there's no self-worth, and if that's part of the issue itself, then that's another reason why a counselling helper, somebody objective who can give you those strategies that they've already learned, the tried and tested strategies, that's when somebody like that might come in really handy, when you're starting from the baseline and it's very difficult even to put a lot of energy into your sense of self-development because you don't feel that you're worthy of it, or because you have absolutely no idea of where to start on that journey. So I think that's something that's very important when it comes to self-counselling, is that there are limitations. There are points when you look at the situation you're in where you realise that you're not actually going to be able to do that kind of thing all on your own, that you need some instruction, you need somewhere to start. And when we talk about person-centred counselling, which is part of what I'm going to be studying over the next couple of years, I'm really at the beginning of quite an extensive journey. Most of the tarot readings that I do and the tarot guidance that I give is what I would deem to be person-centred. And there's a very big difference between the word person-centred and the word self-centred, and I'm just going to explain that briefly. Being self-centred means that you are totally engrossed in your own affairs to the point where you can't actually see anything outside of your own perspective. Being person-centred means that you are completely aware that there is a situation going on outside the level of your own consciousness, or outside the level of, you know, the importance of your own emotional spectrum. But it means that you are dealing with the problem from within. So being person-centred about your counselling approach simply means that if you're a counsellor, you are encouraging the person that you are counselling or guiding to look at what their role is within a situation or dilemma. So we are not looking at the entire family unit, we are not looking overtly at the partner who's involved, we're not looking at anything like that. We are simply looking from a place of inward contemplation, so that the person involved can make their own decision about how to move forward, rather than attacking somebody else, blaming somebody else, or putting the emphasis on somebody else, because essentially that's a waste of energy. It's not that somebody else who's coming for the counselling session, it's the person being guided themselves. So everything needs to start and end with the person who's being guided. There's nothing that we can do about manipulating, controlling, or changing the actions of anybody else in the situation. It's got to be about that person getting the counselling. And person-centred has a lot to do with defining self-worth and allowing self-worth to grow, but it also has something to do with having a look at your limitations and your boundaries, and also taking accountability. This is very important in person-centred counselling, and it's why it's also so difficult for people, because there is an emphasis on taking accountability and responsibility for what goes right and what goes wrong. So there is this underlying idea that you are in the driver's seat of your own life, and really person-centred counselling is about putting that person in the driver's seat and giving them the keys. You know, where they choose to drive will be completely up to them, but before they can drive anywhere, they must be given the skills to drive the car. They must be given that sense that yes, you are entitled to drive this car is your life, off you go. So that's kind of what person-centred counselling is about. And shadow work, I think, is an important step towards being able to self-counsel. As I said earlier, self-counselling is not useful for people who have certain limitations based on their ability to self-counsel. So for example, if it's a long-standing issue for which they cannot find the root cause, if it's something that they've been denying for ages and ages and ages, that it's literally only just come to the surface and they have no necessary tools in place to deal with it, crisis situations, something where a situation has changed very, very dramatically, very quickly, and somebody has been placed into a state of shock. Those are the times where self-counselling is probably not going to be able to do its work. Self-counselling is about more of a levelled out perspective where we're coming at it from a process of self-development which is considered key to the progress of the individual. So we already need to have some of those tools in place. And if you're confused or concerned about whether or not you are able to counsel yourself, either with tarot or with any other tool, with any other kind of form of practice, the best thing to do, I think, would be to test the waters when it comes to shadow work, and watch my video about how to get started with shadow work if you are unsure of where to begin. Shadow work basically gives you a baseline from which to dredge up anything that you may need to deal with in the counselling setting, and in that video I do talk about what to do if you feel uncomfortable or overtly anxious or angry or anything like that during shadow work. I do think that it's a way for you to just recognise whether or not you do have a genuine passion and interest in your own self-development at this time, or whether you're obviously interested in bringing up your issues for some other reason, so to punish yourself or something like that, something that's actually not healthy and doesn't come from as much of a pure perspective. I'll talk to you just briefly about some techniques you can put in place for self-counselling. Obviously, intuition is vitally important when it comes to guiding yourself through your life, and I've talked about intuition before and I will so many more times. One thing that's great to do with self-counselling is to give yourself intuition time. A lot of counsellors will tell you that obviously following your intuition and looking at your gut instincts and working out what you want to do from a pure place is something that you should inject into the situations that come into your life. So it's very easy for somebody like me who has quite a tangible idea of what intuition is to say to somebody, well, when you're in that situation again, use your intuition and your intuition will guide you. Or when he says that thing to hurt you, use your intuition to tell you how to respond. Somebody who's not actually that in touch with their inner voice is not going to be able to use it in a highly stressful or upsetting situation in which they find themselves. They're not going to be able to always do the best thing for themselves or work from their gut instinct because they don't know how to listen to their gut instinct. They've never been put in touch with it before. They might even sometimes feel it physically and think it's a stomachache. I've heard stories like that of people who eventually realise that their intuition is trying to do its work and they were taking indigestion tablets for it. So sometimes it can be difficult to unlock it. So what I would suggest is intuition time is great. If you can just find even 10 minutes, 15 minutes of quiet time during the day, or even a couple of times a week, where you will allow your inner voice to do its thing. And the first few times that you do this, you probably won't even hear anything. Your mind will wander. Focus control is one of those things in self-counselling as well as with regard to being a counsellor yourself that you need to work on because distractions are rife. And unfortunately your mind will wander and you need to be centred around what's going on. You need to be centred around the discussion. So the same thing happens when you're trying to have a telephone conversation with your inner voice. Sometimes you'll become distracted, you'll start thinking about the shopping. But it's like what I said about resilience and patience, you need to persevere with it. So have this intuition time, pick up the phone to your intuition, just lie quietly on the bed, sit in a chair, no distractions, no noise whatsoever. Even if you have to stop off somewhere in your car on the way home to do this, do it. Give your inner voice a chance to say even one thing to you. You don't even have to have a specific problem situation in mind. Just stop and allow quiet to come to the fore and just see if your intuition knocks at the door a little bit. And it might sound surreal at first, but this is really how we let intuition in. There really are no elaborate complex ways of letting it come to you. It is always there. You just need to open the door to it a little bit. Another thing to do when you first start counselling yourself is to use free association. So again, you don't need a specific focus area or problem area to do this. If you feel like things are a little bit topsy-turvy in your life and you would like to begin a process of counselling yourself and being there for yourself and regularly checking in with yourself for sessions and that kind of thing, then I would say free association is a good place to start. So whether you're into scrapbooking or anything like that, if you've got magazines you can cut up, if you just want to try automatic writing, which is basically just asking yourself to write for a 15-minute period or 20-minute period without putting the pen down, down and seeing what comes out for you. All these kinds of things are good, just using pictures, using words to put something together that kind of explains roughly how you're feeling at a certain time. And you'll be surprised with free association what comes up. In a way, free association is like a form of shadow work in itself, because you're not really sure what's going to arise to the surface. You're basically just taking a general feeling, a general vibe, a general circumstance, and trying to put it into something abstract but tangible to actually look at. So it's great for people who don't actually know how they feel or don't actually know what kind of road they want to be on, but they know that they want to begin on a course of self-counselling, and they know that they kind of want to be there for themselves and be their own listening helper. It's great to start out with free association. Another thing to do when you're on your way with listening to your inner voice, setting up that intuition time, is definitely looking at reinforcing your intentions. Reinforcing your intention is very important. Every so often in any counselling setting, we come to a point where we stop on the road and we have a look if the map has actually changed, or if the desire at the end of the road has actually changed. Because quite often, as I said in my goals, tea and tarot video, goals are not stagnant. They don't just stick in one place. As we change and as we expand and as we become more aware, so too do our goals kind of change and shift and look different. Goals are malleable because obviously they're based on an abstract point in time. They're in the future, and the future changes the more we actually involve ourselves in the present and write in the present. So the book is always being written, so it means the ending is always likely to change. It's always subject to change, So I think reinforcing your intentions is important. Every so often when you go along with your self-counselling, which could come from a number of different places, you may use tarot, you may just decide to use meditation, you may decide to check in with your inner voice and see what your inner voice is saying. You might choose to use some kind of self-gestalt therapy where you have a chat with yourself, you have a look at the two different sides of the coin with regard to a decision you have to make and kind of battle through that. There are many different counselling techniques and different schools of counselling where you can use the skills that are being suggested and kind of twist them so that they work in a self-counselling setting. And I'll probably talk about that more in other videos about different ways that you can self-counsel. But I think it's really important to sit down during the counselling process at different set stages, get out the book that you're using to record your progress and decide whether or not your intentions can be reinforced. Have the goals changed? Have the goalposts changed? Are you looking at something different now in your self-counselling process than you were looking at before? And how do you feel about that change? How is that going for you? Finally, I just want to say briefly, I think that spiritual counselling is really important. Transpersonal counselling is still kind of new in a lot of ways, although it's become highly respected now in certain circles, and although it's become appreciated for everything that it is. The psychoanalytic community at first were quite sniffy towards it, and it hasn't gotten the kind of broader focus and the broader appreciation that I feel like it should, but that's just me. I think that a lot of psychotherapeutic techniques and a lot of schools of psychotherapy and counselling reject the idea that spiritual feeling and spiritual intention should be central to the counselling process. And I think that's something that's a massive shame, because many people who don't even consider themselves to be even remotely religious would still consider themselves to be spiritual in a holistic sense, or spiritual in a general way, or like they just have that feeling that there's something beyond them or something within them as within everything else. And I think that's something that can be very liberating during the counselling process. I really believe in the value of ego death. So I believe that the ego is a useful construct, and I believe that it's useful in society and it's useful in certain ways. But I also think that leaving the ego behind and just getting that incredible sense of overall interconnectedness is very therapeutic and liberating, particularly for people who've suffered with things like addiction or abuse. I think it's beautiful to be able to transpersonally counsel somebody so that they have that feeling that not only are they within themselves dealing with the problems that come from within themselves and in their specific circumstance, but also that they are part of something much broader, much more beautiful and incomprehensible and completely all-consuming and all-encompassing. Something that is comforting, something that can teach them lessons, something that they can see themselves in as a microcosm of the macrocosm. That's the kind of vibe that transpersonal counselling is coming from, and that's why I think it's so important. And coming onto my journey as a spiritual counsellor, and I'm going to be doing other forms of counselling as well, I would love to get some more specific qualifications in substance abuse counselling. That's something that I did start on my journey with as a health advisor, but I would like to get some more specific qualifications and really build that up. And I would also like to look into child counselling as well, I think, to an extent. But spiritual counselling is where I'm starting my journey, and the main reason for that is that I would love to become a more proficient tarot reader. I would like to get even better at helping people to get in touch with their pure intention, helping people get in touch with their inner voice, but also helping people to see that there is so much more beauty and wonder out there than just the beauty and wonder that I can ask them to see within their own lives. And I would like to help people get more in touch with their spirituality and be able to articulate it better. And I think a lot of segments of the psychotherapeutic community have been very snippy about spirituality. And I don't know, like I used to feel when I was younger, when I read Freud, that evidently he feels that God is a delusion, and he kind of didn't really like God to come around when people were on the couch, if you like. It was very much considered to be something that was a delusion, that was a distraction to a solution to the problem, that was something that patients should not really be talking about. It's just a distraction, it's something that's not going to help you to deal with your problem. But we can't really deny that a lot of people do believe in divinity, in source energy, in God, in the divinity that lies within them, or in some kind of higher power. And, you know, if that belief bolsters somebody, and if that belief is part of what makes up somebody's life, then I think it's very false and ungratifying not to allow that spiritual segment of somebody's personality to not only integrate with their therapeutic experience, but also to help them with their therapeutic experience. So that's kind of why I want to do that. And I think you know, that I want to move forward on this journey, but I kind of just wanted to articulate for my own documentation the main reason why it's so important for me to move forward on this journey into spiritual counselling specifically, even though it is kind of quite a fringe thing. And I feel that I could always improve as a tarot reader as well. I want to give somebody an experience that's just like overwhelming, and particularly for the people that I read for in my life as well, I think I could always stand to be more aware of how tarot can be utilised as a terrific tool for spiritual exploration. So these are some thoughts I'm having on self-counselling basically, and I know that a great many of you watching this, if anyone's got to the 31-minute mark, will be already using techniques for spiritual counselling, for self-counselling, I beg your pardon. And I think that's something that's fascinating. So if anybody does feel that they are their own best counsellor, or that they self-counsel alongside a therapeutic relationship which exists, then please email me or comment, because I would like to do some more videos on this and I would love some personal perspectives. Oh, and negative as well. I would like some negative experiences, particularly from those of you who have had a therapeutic relationship which went wrong, because that's something that I would like to talk about as well. Some negative experiences that people that I've worked with, or people that are in my life, have discussed with me that I have found to be quite disturbing. So if you have had negative experiences with counselling and have as a result come to realise that self-counselling is more your cup of tea, then again, please do get in touch with me and tell me your stories. I would love to know. Blessed be, guys. Thank you for listening.